A safety-first AI lab accidentally shipped 500,000 lines of its most sensitive code to every developer on Earth. The CEO of the most powerful AI company in history declared on a podcast that we have already crossed into AGI. That same lab secretly warned governments that its newest model could be used to launch cyber attacks at a scale no defender can handle. And the man who built the foundations of modern AI walked away from Meta, raised $1 billion, and bet everything that the entire industry has been running in the wrong direction. All of this happened in March 2026, and nobody is connecting the dots. So that is exactly what we are going to do today. Because when you put all four stories together, a pattern emerges, and that pattern tells you something about AI that no single headline ever could. So let's get into it. We're starting with the one that hit last, March 31st. And I mean, look at that file size. A command line tool, something that should be maybe a few hundred kilobytes at most, ships at 59.8 megabytes. Someone at Anthropic accidentally bundled a JavaScript source map file into the package. That source map pointed to a publicly accessible zip archive sitting on Anthropic's Cloudflare R2 bucket. And inside that archive, 512,000 lines of TypeScript across nearly 2,000 files, the complete internal source code of Claude Code. Now, of course, the surface reaction is, okay, embarrassing, packaging error, human mistake, these things happen. But here's what actually got exposed, and this is where it gets genuinely interesting. 44 plus hidden feature flags, not public features, hidden ones, including something called undercover mode. I mean, that name alone. An agent mode where Claude makes contributions to code bases without revealing its AI. And there are permission bypass mechanics in there too, meaning Claude code can be configured to operate with elevated permissions that the user never explicitly granted. And you have to understand, Claude Code already has direct file system access, terminal access. It can read, write, and execute on your machine. Most users have no idea how deep that actually goes, and the source code confirmed it. The agent orchestration layer is far more powerful than anything Anthropic had disclosed publicly. Security researcher Chaofan Shao spotted it first. His post on X hit 28 million views. Within hours, the code was mirrored on GitHub. One repository hit 84,000 stars and 82,000 forks before Anthropic started issuing DMCA takedowns. And I mean, that's a pretty wild thing to think about. The blueprints for Claude Code's agent architecture are now permanently in the hands of every competitor, every researcher, and every attacker who wants to build supply chain exploits targeting developers who use this tool. That attack surface is now mapped for free. Anthropic's official statement was that this was a release packaging issue caused by human error, not a security breach. But here's the thing. This framing obscures something critical. The exposure of an agent's internal architecture is itself a security event. It doesn't matter that no passwords leaked. What matters is that the blueprint for one of the most capable agentic tools on Earth, a tool that runs in your terminal with elevated access to your machine, is now public knowledge. But look, here's what really got under my skin. This was their second lapse in a week. And I'm going to come back to that. But first, we need to talk about what was happening on the other side of the country. Because while Anthropic was dealing with this disaster, NVIDIA was telling a very different kind of story to the cameras. March 23rd, 8 days before the code leak, Lex Fridman releases episode 495. His guest is Jensen Huang. And about 40 minutes in, Lex floats a definition of AGI. The definition, an AI that can start, grow, and run a $1 billion tech company. And then Jensen responds, I think it's now. I think we've achieved AGI.
Technology company that's worth
A good one or a one?
no. It has to be worth more than $1 billion, more than $1 billion. So, you know how hard it is to do all of those components. So how far are we away from that? So we're talking about OpenClaw that does all the incredibly complex stuff that are required to first of all innovate, to find customers, to sell to them, to manage to build a team of some agents, some humans, all that kind of stuff. Is this 5, 10, 15, 20 years away?
I think it's now. I think we've achieved AGI.
You think you can have a company run by an AI system like this?
Possible. And the reason for that is this. You said billion, and you didn't say forever. And so, for example, it is not out of the question that a claw was able to create a web service, some interesting little app that all of a sudden, you know, a few billion people used for 50 cents. And then it went out of business again shortly after. Now, we saw a whole bunch of those type of companies during the internet era, and most of those websites were not anything more sophisticated than what OpenClaw could generate today.
Now, that's a pretty extraordinary thing to say. No qualifications, no hedging, just a flat declaration from the CEO of the company that builds the hardware that runs something like 90% of AI training on Earth. And the internet obviously exploded. Everyone had a take. But I think most of the coverage missed what's actually being said beneath the surface. Because this isn't a scientific statement, it's a market statement. And the difference matters enormously. Jensen didn't discover AGI by the definition AI researchers actually use: systems with broad generalization across perception, reasoning, planning, social cognition. He didn't say AGI by the ARC AGI benchmark definition, where GPT-5 currently scores 57%. He picked a very specific, very narrow definition, basically business productivity, and declared victory inside that definition. Now, ask yourself, who benefits from that framing? NVIDIA's CUDA ecosystem powers over 90% of AI training globally. Every time a lab trains a frontier model, Jensen's company gets paid. The more labs believe AGI is imminent or already here, the more they pour into infrastructure. The more they pour into infrastructure, the more NVIDIA sells. I mean, declaring AGI isn't just a bold claim, it's a demand catalyst. And the backlash from the research community was pretty telling. DeepMind researchers pushed back publicly. Benchmark specialists pointed out that the definition Jensen used isn't what any serious researcher means by AGI. One researcher called it goalpost moving. Another said it was a PR move disguised as a philosophical position. But here's the thing, and I think this is actually the important bit. It doesn't matter if Jensen is technically right or technically wrong. He runs a $4 trillion company. When he says AGI is here, markets move. AI tokens surged after the interview, and suddenly the Overton window shifts. Suddenly, politicians, journalists, investors are treating AGI as a present reality rather than a future risk. That changes regulation, that changes funding, that changes how governments think about the models that labs like Anthropic are building right now. Jensen didn't discover AGI, he priced it in. And that's a super important distinction. Now, this is a perfect bridge to the Anthropic story, because while Jensen was on a podcast redefining AGI for the cameras, Anthropic was quietly telling a very different story to people who never appear on podcasts. So, this is the first Anthropic leak, the one that set up everything that followed. Late March, before the code leak, Anthropic has an internal CMS, a content management system, that they use to draft and stage blog posts. Someone misconfigured it, and suddenly roughly 3,000 internal assets were publicly accessible: draft posts, internal memos, stuff clearly not meant for public eyes. And read what it says. By far the most powerful AI model we have ever developed, a step change.
The surface reaction is okay. New Anthropic model coming, more powerful than Opus 4.6, higher inference cost, enterprise rollout incoming. But here's the deeper story, the one buried inside that CMS dump. Anthropic had privately briefed government officials about Mythos before this leak. Not customers, not the public. Governments. And the briefing was not about capability, it was about risk. Specifically, that Mythos and models that follow it could enable large-scale cyber attacks that outpace the ability of defenders to respond. Sit with that for a second. A safety-first AI lab built a model so powerful their first move was to privately warn governments it could be weaponized before they told their own users it existed. Now, Anthropic would say, and I think this is genuinely their position, that this is responsible scaling. This is exactly what a careful company should do. Get ahead of the risk, brief the right people, roll out slowly. And look, I do understand that argument. I really do. But here's what that framing obscures. If you genuinely believe the model posed existential cyber attack risk, would you build it and deploy it to enterprise customers slowly, or would you stop? Anthropic chose to build it. They chose to deploy it. They just chose to brief governments on the way in. I mean, that's not a safety decision. That's a liability management decision. And the AI industry has become very, very good at calling the second the first. And here's where the timeline becomes genuinely devastating. The Mythos CMS leak happened first. Days later, the Claude code source leak. Same company, 2 weeks, 2 major operational failures. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not saying Anthropic is careless. They're clearly building extraordinary technology. But the implication of 2 leaks in 2 weeks at the lab that explicitly tells the world it prioritizes safety above everything else, that's an institutional signal. That's not a one-time mistake. And this is exactly what Yann Lecun has been warning about for years, which is a perfect segue to the man who walked away from it all. March 10th, 3 weeks before the code leak, 17 days before Jensen declares AGI on Lex, Paris, France. Yann Lecun, Turing Award winner, godfather of modern deep learning, former chief AI scientist at Meta, announces Advanced Machine Intelligence Labs, AMI Labs, $1.03 billion in seed funding, $3.5 billion pre-money valuation. And look at who backed them. Bezos Expeditions, Samsung, Toyota Ventures, and NVIDIA. The same NVIDIA that CEO just declared AGI is here. The same NVIDIA that's hardware powers the LLM scaling labs that Lecun has spent years publicly calling a dead end. I mean, that's not a coincidence. That's a strategy, and I'll come back to that. But first, what is Lecun actually building? Because I think most coverage completely fumbled this part. Lecun's thesis, which he's been arguing publicly for years, is that large language models are fundamentally the wrong architecture for general intelligence. Predicting the next token on text data doesn't produce understanding. It produces pattern matching at scale. And pattern matching at scale, no matter how much you scale it, will never generalize to the real world the way a truly intelligent system needs to. His alternative is what he calls world models, AI systems trained on raw sensory data, video, audio, physics simulations, tactile feedback, that build internal representations of how the world actually works, cause and effect, physics, planning, the kind of grounded understanding you need to build a robot that can navigate an unfamiliar room or an agent that can make genuinely novel decisions. Now, the surface reaction is, okay, bold bet, interesting architecture, Lecun has credibility. Let's see if it works. But think about what this actually is. This is the highest profile direct challenge to the dominant LLM paradigm the industry has ever seen. This is not a researcher publishing a paper. This is a Turing Award winner raising $1 billion and building a lab with one explicit purpose: to demonstrate that the multi-trillion-dollar bet on LLM scaling is misguided. Now, here's the take that I haven't really seen anywhere else. Put all 4 stories side by side. What do you actually see? You see Anthropic, the safety-first lab, leaking its own source code twice in a week. You see Jensen, the man who profits from AI acceleration, declaring AGI on a podcast. You see Anthropic privately briefing government about a model that could enable cyber attacks while simultaneously pushing it into enterprise early access. And you see Lecun, backed by the same NVIDIA that backs everyone else, launching a lab designed to blow up the entire paradigm. I mean, they're not making a bet, they're selling the arena. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think world models, Lecun's bet, are the real path to general intelligence? Or is LLM scaling going to get us there first? And honestly, do you think any of this changes how you think about using these tools day to day? Drop it below, but of course, let me know what you think.